dialogue and inner thinking. We've already discussed their definition and seen examples of each. Now we're going to explore how writers use dialogue and inner thinking and the ways in which dialogue and inner thinking can help us make our narrative writing better. So let's first define what dialogue is. Dialogue creates conversations to show the action of the story instead of just describing it. Good writers use dialogue for many purposes. First of all, it can help give the character a voice. It can help the reader understand the character, and it allows the reader to see and hear how the character expresses themselves. Let's look at some examples. This is an example from The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. I'm going to read the passage to you, and while I read the passage, I want you to notice what the dialogue tells us about the character. I wished Rowdy was still my friend. I could have sent him after Roger. It would have been like King Kong battling Godzilla. I realized how much of my self-worth, my sense of safety was based on Rowdy's fists. But Rowdy hated me, and Roger hated me. I was good at being hated by guys who could kick my butt. It's not a talent you really want to have. My mother and father weren't home, so I turned to my grandmother for advice. Notice here that we have some quotation marks, so this might mean that we have some dialogue coming up. Grandma, I said, I punched this big guy in the face, and he just walked away, and now I'm afraid he's going to kill me. Why did you punch him? She asked. He was bullying me. You should have just walked away. He called me Chief and Squaw Boy. Then you should have kicked him in the balls. She pretended to kick a big guy in the crotch, and we both laughed. So let's look at this question. What does the dialogue used in this passage tell us about the character? Let's first box out where we see all the dialogue. So first of all, I notice that the character talks about being afraid. Let's see where we can find this. So here I learn about the character through the dialogue. I learn that the character is afraid. Another thing I learn is that it shows us that the character stood up for his people, not just for himself. This is a pretty bold move, and I learned this through the dialogue. He first tells us that he was getting bullied, which is why he punched the boy. But he also says that the boy called him Chief and Squaw Boy, which are two racist terms used to define Native Americans. Finally, it shows me that his grandma is proud of him. Because she says, you should have kicked him in the balls. I can make an inference here that he feels that the grandmother feels proud of him. Let's look at how to format our dialogue. There are some very important steps when formatting your dialogue. First, you need to put quotation marks around the words a character says. For example, these are all quotation marks around words that the character says. Also, the character needs to use punctuation inside the quotation marks. So if you notice, here we have some examples of punctuation inside the quotation marks. Another thing we need to do is you need a new paragraph when a new character speaks. If you notice over here, we have a new paragraph every time there's a new speaker. Also notice that characters, it's written here, I said, or she asked. Once it's written once and then twice, we can assume that it goes back and forth. But until you have said this and this, we might get confused between all of these new paragraphs, so you must identify them. Finally, if you notice, there are two little lines around Chief and Squaw Boy. These are quotes inside of quotes. Make sure that if you are talking about a quote inside of a quote that you use these little lines. Next, we're going to talk about inner thinking. Let's first define what inner thinking is. Inner thinking is when you explain what the characters are thinking and feeling. Good writers use inner thinking for many purposes. For example, they help the reader understand things you can't get from watching a character's actions from the outside. So they tell us basically what the character is thinking. They can be used to raise the emotional level of a scene or to lighten a scene. So let's use our text again to find this. First, let's box out where we see our inner thinking. Let's read it again. I wish Rowdy was still my friend. I could have sent him after Roger. It would have been like King Kong battling Godzilla. I realized how much of my self-worth, my sense of safety, was based on Rowdy's fists. But Rowdy hated me. Roger hated me. I was good at being hated by guys who could kick my butt. It's not a talent you really want to have. So thinking about the question, what does the inner thinking used in this passage tell us about the character? It tells us the character misses his friend Rowdy. I see this in the first sentence, when he says, I wish Rowdy was still my friend. This tells me that the character must miss his friend. Another thing that I see is that it tells me that Rowdy makes him feel safe. And I see this here when he says, I realized how much of my self-worth, my sense of safety, was based on Rowdy's fists. Understanding this not only tells me that he misses his friend, but it also tells me that the character feels safe around his friend Rowdy, and now he might not feel very safe. It also is sort of foreshadowing what's to come in the sentence. It tells us about the characters, about the friends the character chooses. So if you notice in here, it tells us that the character is good at being friends with guys who want to kick his butt. This might tell us or give us a hint about what kind of a character this is. Maybe he's not very strong, but he did punch someone, so he must be pretty brave. So the trick to formatting inner thinking is there really is no trick. You just have to write the thoughts of the character. Here we see the character's wishes and thoughts about friendship. But you don't need to use quotes. The only time you need to use quotes when you're writing about inner thinking is when the character is remembering a conversation that they had in the past. Now let's take a look at what I want you to do. I want you to go back into your draft. Right now I just have up the example that we are already looking at. And what I want you to do is choose highlighter up here and highlight where you can add dialogue in one color. And in another color, I want you to highlight where you can add inner thinking. So go through all of your writing and do this, and then go back and add it in. I hope this helped. Try it out.